Rejection is the more probable outcome of any medical school application in North America. So if you faced medical school rejection, you're not alone. If you're serious about getting into medical school this time around, then this video is for you. I'm going to help you identify firstly, why you were rejected, and secondly, what you need to do differently this time in order to get accepted. Finally, I'll go over 7 top tips for reapplying to medical school. For those of you who don't know me, hi, I'm Nadine Evans, an admissions associate at BeMo Academic Consulting. As you might already know, we help students with admissions to med school and other professional programs because we believe that everyone deserves access to higher education. That's why we give everything that we learn in our consulting programs absolutely free on our YouTube channel, so make sure that you subscribe right now so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Also, if you'd like us to help you get into medical school, be sure to click on the link above or below this video to schedule your free initial consultation. Okay, so let's get straight into it. Firstly, if you didn't get any interviews, then you need to ask yourself the following questions that I'm going to cover to find out what could have resulted in your application being rejected. Number 1, how many schools did you apply to? There is a definite sweet spot when it comes to the number of medical school applications that you should send. As a general rule of thumb, if you only applied to one or a handful of medical schools, what failed you is that you put all of your eggs into one or a few baskets. More applications equals higher chances of acceptance, the same way that fewer applications equals lower chance of acceptance. While it's a good idea to be focused on schools that you're interested in and best suited to attend, you can't be so selective to the point that you're turning down opportunities to become a doctor. Getting accepted at any medical school is a huge accomplishment, and it means that you'll be on your way towards becoming a doctor, which is really your true end goal. So if you didn't apply to enough medical schools, applying more broadly will help you maximize your chances of acceptance. On the other hand, applying to too many medical schools can also be just as detrimental as applying to too few medical schools. Firstly, if you're focused on sending out as many applications as possible, you might actually be targeting schools that are not appropriate for you. So for example, if you apply to medical schools that are highly focused on research but you have no research experience, those schools are unlikely to select you. Secondly, if you only target suitable schools but you apply in such high quantities, you're likely going to be overloaded when it comes time to fill out secondary applications. While some schools only send secondary applications to select applicants, other schools send out secondary applications to every single applicant that applies. So if you apply to 30 schools, you could have 30 secondaries in front of you, all due back within the same 2-week period. If this happened to you, were you able to submit all essays by their deadlines, and can you honestly say that you gave each and every one of them your absolute best effort? If not, this is definitely something that you'll need to work on when you're reapplying to medical school. So my reapplying to medical schools tip number 1, apply to 15 to 20 suitable medical schools based on your statistics, interests, and experiences. The second question I want to ask is, when did you apply? Many medical schools utilize rolling admissions, so the longer that you wait to apply, the lower your chances of acceptance become. Applicants that apply early will have their applications reviewed earlier and will start taking up interview spots. Keep in mind that when AMCAS starts accepting applications in June, they verify each application before sending it on to medical schools. In June, AMCAS can verify and transmit applications to medical schools within a few days. However, the process of verifying applications and transmitting them goes from a few days to a few weeks in July and August as the backlog grows with the sheer volume of submitted applications. Overall, if you applied too late, you could have been rejected or placed even on a medical school waitlist simply because no interview spots were remaining, or worse, because your application didn't even arrive to the school before their application deadline. So my reapplying to medical school tip number 2 is to submit your application as early as possible in June and set July 1st as the absolute latest submission date. My third question is, did you receive secondary applications at all schools that you applied to? If you didn't receive any secondary applications, or if you only received some, then the problem lies with your primary application. It likely just wasn't as competitive as you thought it was, and this could come down to a variety of different factors, such as your personal statement, your AMCAS work and activities section, letters of recommendation, as well as your GPA and MCAT scores. If you determine that your GPA and MCAT score doesn't meet the average accepted scores at the schools that you applied to, then your issue is that you applied to schools where you didn't really have a realistic chance of acceptance. If your GPA and MCAT scores are competitive at the schools that you apply to, but you still didn't receive any secondary applications, then it definitely comes down to your application materials and they just weren't as strong as you hoped that they were. If, on the other hand, you received secondary applications at all schools that you applied to, the next question that I have for you is, when did you submit your secondary essays? Medical schools correlate the speed in which you send your secondary applications back to them with your level of interest in their school. Now, I'm not suggesting that you rush your secondary application, but if you take too long to send your secondary application back, you'll be telling admissions committees that you're not very interested in their school and that you're prioritizing other schools over theirs. A prompt submission, on the other hand, goes a really long way and tells the school that you're still very interested in both their program and institution. So my reapplying to medical school tip number 3 is that your secondary essays need to be submitted within 2 weeks of receiving them. My fourth question is, did you take the Casper test? And if so, how did you prepare? There are a lot of medical schools that require the Casper as part of their admission process. So if you took the Casper, you know that it's not a test that you can do well on without preparing. Keep in mind that the Casper test is used as an intermediary step for admissions committees to determine who should be invited to an in-person interview. If you took a Casper test and you didn't prepare effectively, this is likely why you didn't receive an interview and in turn faced medical school rejection. We actually have a ton of videos on the Casper test, so be sure to check them out to learn about what the test is about, how to practice with official questions, and so much more. My reapplying to medical school top tip number 4 is that the Casper test is actually really coachable. Check out our blog that I've added in the description to find out how you can improve your Casper test score by 23%. My fifth question is, who helped you with your application? While it's true that some students get accepted into medical school without seeking the help of a professional, many do not. If you applied on time to the appropriate amount of schools, to the ideal schools, if your MCAT and GPA met average accepted MCAT and GPA scores, if you feel that you aced the Casper test, then all roads lead to the fact that your application just didn't do enough. It may have been decent, maybe even good, but it wasn't great, and you likely blended in with the thousands of other applicants. The reason many students seek out medical school admissions consulting services is because they want to get their application right the first time so that they can get accepted from the get-go. Reapplying to medical school is obviously very expensive, it's time-consuming, and it's exhausting. So if you are one of the many that face medical school rejection, then you have the opportunity to get it right the next time around, and a professional consultant can really help get you there. So my reapplying to medical school top tip number 5 is to have your medical school application reviewed by a professional to ensure that your application highlights your strengths and proves that you're a mature, intelligent, unique, and suitable applicant. My sixth question for you is, did you apply to American medical schools? So this is for Canadians because medical schools in Canada are really competitive, and in general, they're more competitive than American medical schools. For this reason, if you're a Canadian applicant, it's a good idea to apply to a few American medical schools so that you have a backup plan in place should you get rejected from all Canadian medical schools. Now, that's not to say that every single American medical school is easier to get into compared with Canadian medical schools, but in general, the level of competition is lower at American medical schools. Now, medical school prerequisites are similar at both American and Canadian medical schools, so Canadians usually don't have any issue having their undergraduate coursework accepted. Just keep in mind that medical school tuition at American medical schools is a lot more expensive compared to the tuition at Canadian medical schools, and Canadians typically don't qualify for financial assistance and scholarships at most medical schools. So my reapplying to medical school top tip number 6 is to check out our blog for a list of Canadian-friendly American medical schools to consider applying to next cycle. I'll also include a link to this in the description of the video. Now let's get into the interview phase for all of you who were lucky enough to get at least one interview. So my first question is, how many interviews did you receive? So if you made it this far into the admissions process, you should be very proud of yourself as you were likely very close to getting accepted. The number of interviews that you receive can tell you a lot about why you faced medical school rejection. If you received less than 3 interviews, then there were likely a few different contributing factors that resulted in your application being rejected. Poor interview skills, application, Casper skills, timing, and even the amount and suitability of schools that you applied to could have all been nails in the coffin. So in this case, the best advice I can give you is to work on all the areas that I mentioned before you reapply to medical school. If, however, you received more than 3 interviews and were rejected from all schools, then your interview skills are likely to blame. So my next question for you is, how did you prepare for your interviews? Perhaps you tried winging your interview and weren't prepared for such thought-provoking questions such as, tell me about yourself, why do you want to be a doctor, and what is your greatest weakness? Maybe you practiced with a variety of medical school interview questions, which is a great start, but without professional feedback, you maybe had no idea if the responses that you planned were strong enough. Perhaps you memorized a bunch of answers and blanked during the interview, or maybe just the high-pressure environment made you nervous and you just didn't do as well as you'd hoped. Regardless of what exact situation you believe was to your detriment, your performance wasn't enough to get you accepted, and unfortunately, you didn't stand out compared with other applicants. Now, with this said, it's not too late to improve your interview performance and get accepted the next time around. So my reapplying to medical school top tip number 7 is to participate in 6 to 8 realistic mock interviews with personalized feedback in the appropriate interview format, whether that's panel, traditional, or MMI. So this will wrap up another one of my videos. I hope you found this video helpful, so please make sure that you subscribe, like, and leave a comment if you have any questions that I can help you with. Are you still wondering why you were rejected? Were you in a situation that I didn't describe in this video? Just let me know in the comments section and I'll be sure to get back to you with my recommendations. If you want us to help you get into medical school, make sure that you click on the link either above or below this video to schedule your free initial consultation. That's it for today. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.